It was 11:18 p.m. on a warm Thursday night in Savannah, Georgia, when I quietly unlocked my front door, stepped into my dark foyer, and completely upended 11 years of my life. My flight back from Europe had landed 4 days ahead of schedule. The architectural photography project I had been shooting across Lisbon and Venice wrapped up faster than expected, and instead of calling ahead, I decided to pull off a surprise homecoming. I expected an empty house. I expected to throw my camera bags in the corner, pour a glass of bourbon, and collapse into my own bed. Instead, the soft glow of the kitchen light was spilling into the hallway. A pair of women's sneakers sat neatly beside the rug, and the faint sound of indie folk music was drifting from a small Bluetooth speaker on the counter. I smiled, remembering that my best friend, Emma, was temporarily staying at my place while her new apartment lease was being finalized. I set my keys down quietly and walked toward the kitchen. Emma stepped out of the laundry room carrying a basket of folded towels. She was wearing an old, oversized gray hoodie that belonged to me, her hair pinned up in a messy bun. She looked up, saw me standing in the doorway, and froze completely solid. "Nathan?" she whispered, her eyes wide with total shock. "Last time I checked," I offered, pulling a small, tired smile. She looked at my heavy rolling suitcase, then at my travel jacket, then at the clock on the wall. You're not supposed to be here." "Touching welcome, Emma," I teased gently. "I missed you too." I turned toward the staircase, rubbing the back of my neck. I was exhausted, jet-lagged, and desperate for a warm shower and my own mattress. Before my foot could touch the bottom step, Emma dropped the laundry basket with a heavy thud. She bolted across the hardwood floor and planted herself firmly in front of the banister, blocking my path. "Wait," she said, her breathing suddenly fast and uneven. "You can't go upstairs." I stopped, looking at her in confusion. "Why not?" "Because..." She swallowed hard, her cheeks flushing a deep shade of crimson under the hallway light. "Because you just can't." I narrowed my eyes slightly. "Emma, did you destroy my house?" "Define destroy," she muttered. "Is there an animal up there?" I asked. "No." "Is there a person up there?" Emma glared at me. "Seriously, Nathan?" I stood there on the landing, looking at the woman who had been my best friend for over a decade. I had seen Emma lose jobs, go through awful breakups, get stranded on highways, and accidentally set a kitchen towel on fire during a dinner party. But I had never, in 11 years, seen her genuinely terrified of me walking into my own bedroom. So let me ask you a question. When the person you have secretly loved for 4 years looks at you with panicked eyes and begs you not to walk up the stairs, would you turn around and give her time to hide the evidence? Or would you walk up those steps and finally find out what she has been keeping from you? My name is Nathan Reed. I am 31 years old, and I work as an architectural and historic heritage photographer based in Savannah, Georgia. My job is built around preservation and quiet observation. I travel to old cities, document decaying historical structures, and capture details that most people walk past without noticing. I know how to read the subtle lines of a building. Yet for years, I pretended I couldn't read the subtle shifts in tone whenever Emma Clark looked at me. Emma and I met 11 years ago during our senior year at Savannah College of Art and Design. She walked into an art history lecture 20 minutes late, slid into the empty seat beside me, and whispered, "If the professor asks, I was here the whole time." "I don't even know your name," I had whispered back. "Perfect," she replied smoothly. "Then lying for me has zero emotional consequences." We went for coffee after that lecture, and by the time the cups were empty, we were inseparable. Over the next decade, we navigated adulthood side by side. We helped each other move into terrible first apartments, celebrated career milestones, survived awful dates, and held each other up through family losses. Whenever mutual acquaintances asked the inevitable question, "Why aren't you two dating?" Emma would laugh and say, "Standards," and I'd chime in right on cue, "Exactly. Mine." We both laughed, and we were both lying. Underneath my sarcastic remarks lay a deep, unyielding scar. When I was 26, I was in a serious relationship with a woman who demanded that I give up my travel-heavy photography career to settle down in a suburban corporate studio. I tried. But within 6 months, I felt like a stranger in my own life. The relationship ended in mutual exhaustion, leaving me with a simple, dangerous lesson. If someone has to choose between you and the life they want, eventually they will resent whichever one they choose. Because of that trauma, I created a personal rule early in my friendship with Emma. Never make your best friend responsible for your feelings. Emma was my anchor. I couldn't risk losing her to a failed romance. Yet my heart had betrayed my rule 4 years ago. Emma had fallen asleep on my living room couch after working 30 straight hours on a children's book illustration deadline. I had walked into the room, wrapped a blanket over her shoulders, and picked up her cold cup of tea. I had looked down at her soft, quiet face in the dim morning light and thought, this is what I want to come home to for the rest of my life. The thought had terrified me so much that I immediately erected an emotional fortress wall around my heart. Emma carried her own hidden scars. Her family had relocated constantly during her childhood, leaving her with a deep-seated fear of being someone people enjoyed in small doses, but never included in their permanent future. Her last long-term relationship ended when her ex told her, "You're easy to love when you're here, Emma. I just never know how long you'll be here." 6 weeks before I returned from Europe, Emma's apartment lease ended, and her new rental unit was delayed due to major electrical rewiring. I had offered her my place from Lisbon. "Use my house. It's empty anyway." I thought I was just being a good friend. I had no idea that by giving her my house key, I was setting off a chain reaction that would tear down every rule I had ever built. I looked at Emma standing on the staircase landing, her hands resting tightly against the wooden banister. "I can sleep on the living room sofa," I offered gently, "if you've secretly converted my bedroom into a full-scale art studio." Emma let out a stressed sigh, rubbing her forehead. "You watch terrible television, Nathan." "Then let me go up," I said softly.
Imagzausta,
"I just want to put my bag down." She held my gaze for 5 long seconds before her shoulders slumped in total defeat. "Fine. But don't make it weird." That sentence has never once prevented a situation from becoming weird, I noted, stepping past her and heading up the stairs. My house was a 2-story historic craftsman. The second floor contained a small home office, a guest bedroom, and my master suite at the end of the hall. I walked down the quiet corridor. The door to my master bedroom was wide open. I stepped inside and stopped dead in my tracks. The room didn't look destroyed. It looked occupied. On the wooden armchair in the corner sat her denim jacket. On my nightstand lay her reading glasses, a sketch pad, and a small tube of hand cream. Her favorite soft woven travel blanket was spread across the foot of my king-sized mattress. The air in the room smelled distinctly of her jasmine perfume and clean cotton. My eyes drifted toward the exposed brick wall beside my bed. Pinned neatly into the mortar, arranged in 6 perfect chronological rows, were every single postcard I had sent her over the past 7 months. 23 postcards, from Lisbon, Porto, Madrid, Florence, and Venice. She hadn't just saved them in a drawer. She had displayed them right beside the pillow where she slept every night. "Why are my postcards beside my bed?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Emma stepped into the doorway behind me, crossing her arms defensively. "Technically, it's been my bed for the past 9 days." I turned around to face her. "You've been sleeping in my room? Try not to sound so scandalized," she said, her cheeks flushing red again. "The guest room ceiling had a small plumbing leak from the upper HVAC unit last week. The contractor had to cut out a section of drywall. Your room was the only one with a functional ceiling fan. Right?" I murmured, taking in the scene. My eyes then landed on a thick, cream-colored envelope resting on the small wooden table beside my desk. Written across the front in her neat, distinct cursive handwriting was a single word: Nathan. Before I could process what it was, Emma darted across the rug, snatched the envelope off the table, and shoved it behind her back. "What is that?" I asked, stepping closer. "Nothing," she said quickly. That is very clearly my name written in your handwriting. Very observant, she countered, taking a step back. 7 months abroad really sharpened your detective skills. Emma. It's private notes for my book project, she lied smoothly, shoving the envelope into her hoodie pocket. I looked at her guarded expression, deciding not to push her into a corner, at least not yet. Practical logistics quickly intervened to complicate our night. Her new apartment was still 6 days away from being cleared for move-in, and my guest room was currently an unpainted construction zone. I'm taking the living room couch, I declared, picking up my duffel bag. You're 6'1", Nathan, Emma argued immediately. The sofa is 5'8". You will wake up with a ruined spine. It's 1 week, I replied. You are not sleeping on a tiny sofa in your own house, she insisted, taking my duffel bag out of my hand. It's a king-sized mattress. We are 2 consenting adults who have known each other for 11 years. I think we can survive sharing a bed without making a mess of it. I stared at her in the dim bedroom light, my pulse accelerating. Sharing a bed is a terrible idea, Em. Why? She asked, tilting her head with a challenging spark in her hazel eyes. Are you worried you can't handle it? I am worried about my territorial integrity, I muttered, retreating behind humor. The border is down the middle, she instructed, pointing at the mattress. Don't cross it. And just like that, what was supposed to be a quiet homecoming turned into a high-stakes game of emotional forced proximity. At 5 a.m. the following morning, my jet lag woke me up completely. I quietly slipped out of bed, careful not to disturb Emma, who was fast asleep on the far side of the mattress. I tiptoed downstairs to the kitchen, planning to make a pot of strong black coffee. When I opened the refrigerator, I stopped in my tracks. The middle shelf was meticulously stocked with my exact post-flight preferences. 2 bottles of sparkling mineral water, a container of local Greek yogurt, fresh blueberries, and a carton of dark roast cold brew. On the counter sat a brand new bag of my favorite coffee beans from a small roast house 3 miles away. 10 minutes later, the soft sound of footsteps echoed on the stairs. Emma walked into the kitchen wearing oversized sweatpants and clutching her hands together. You stocked my fridge? I asked, leaning against the counter with a steaming mug in my hand. You were supposed to come home in 4 days, she murmured, leaning against the kitchen island. I wanted you to have decent food when you landed. You remembered what I eat after long flights? No, she said dryly. A psychic told me. I looked at her across the island, dropping my voice. You planned all of this? It's called being a decent friend, Nathan. Don't romanticize it. The word romanticize hung in the quiet morning air like a strike of lightning. We both went silent for a beat too long. Emma walked over to the cabinet, reached up, and pulled down my favorite vintage blue ceramic mug, the one I had brought back from a flea market in Maine 6 years ago. That's my mug, I noted, watching her pour herself a cup of tea. You haven't been here for 7 months, she countered, taking a slow sip. Ownership expires after 90 days. I don't think property law works that way. You've been overseas for 7 months, Nathan, she said, her voice dropping all playfulness as she looked up at me. And somehow you're still territorial about a coffee mug. She paused, taking a slow breath. Actually, you've been overseas for 7 months. That is a really long time. The weight of her words settled heavily in my chest. It was the first time she had openly admitted that my absence had left a mark. Later that morning, while we were making a simple breakfast of eggs and toast, I walked over to the exposed brick wall in my bedroom to grab my sketchbook. Did you send anyone else 23 postcards? Emma asked from the doorway, leaning against the frame with her arms crossed. No, I answered honestly, turning to look at her. Not a single person? I don't write letters to other people, Em. Just you. Emma searched my face, her hazel eyes softening. Interesting. Don't do that, I said. Do what? That look, I muttered. The look that says you're analyzing my hidden motives. I don't need to analyze you, Nathan, she whispered gently. You're remarkably predictable when you're trying to hide something. That evening, we ordered takeout from our favorite Thai restaurant and ate on the living room rug, using the coffee table as our desk. So, Emma said casually, mixing her noodles with a fork, did you have any dramatic European romances while you were playing artist in Italy? I looked up from my plate. What? 7 months. Romantic old cities. Dramatic historic architecture. You're a photographer. Surely you met someone. You think camera gear comes with automated dates? Cracked. I'm asking if you met anyone, Nathan, she pressed, her gaze locking onto mine.
No, iyan suarat instantly.
I was busy. 7 months is a very long time to be busy, she noted softly. What about you? I asked, throwing the spotlight back onto her. Did you meet anyone while I was gone? Emma paused, her fork hovering over her plate. Maybe. My heart did a sudden, violent drop in my chest. I set my chopsticks down a little too hard on the table. Maybe. Emma looked at my sharp reaction, a small, knowing smile touching the corners of her lips. Wow, there it is. What? I asked defensively. Nothing, she teased. Just fascinating reflex speed. She took a slow sip of her water before adding quietly, No, Nathan, there wasn't anyone. Why not? I asked before I could stop myself. Emma looked directly into my eyes, dropping all traces of banter. Maybe I was waiting for someone to come home. The room went dead silent. My throat went completely dry. Before I could process her sentence, Emma let out a soft laugh and added, My new sofa delivery, obviously. I've been sitting on lawn chairs for 2 weeks. I knew right then that she was retreating behind a wall, protecting herself just as I had done for years. That night was our second night sharing my king-sized bed. We lay side by side in the dark room, separated by the row of 2 memory foam pillows I had stubbornly reinstated down the middle of the mattress. What did you miss most while you were away? Emma's voice drifted through the quiet darkness around 11:30 p.m. About Savannah? I asked, staring at the ceiling. About home, she corrected softly. I listed off logical things. My camera editing monitors. Fresh seafood. My own shower. Not living out of a suitcase. Very sentimental, she teased gently. I went silent for a moment, listening to the steady rhythm of her breathing across the pillow barrier. I missed your voice more than I missed this house, Em. I confessed quietly into the dark. The room went completely still. Nathan, she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. Jet lag? I muttered quickly, rolling onto my side away from her. Jet lag makes people say ridiculous things. Jet lag doesn't write complete sentences. Nathan? She murmured back. A long minute passed in total silence. Then, just as I thought she had fallen asleep, I heard her whisper softly to the wall. I missed yours too. The next morning, I woke up at 6:30 a.m. The middle row of pillows had been kicked off the foot of the bed during the night. Emma had rolled over in her sleep. Her hand was resting on the sheet right between us, her fingers only half an inch away from mine. I looked at her hand, my chest aching with 4 years of buried love, realizing that the border between us was officially falling apart. On Friday afternoon, the 3rd day after my return, the fragile truce between us officially exploded. At 2:30 p.m., a loud knock echoed at the front door. I walked downstairs and opened it to find a courier holding an express overnight envelope addressed to Emma Clark. The return address listed a major publishing house in Boston, Massachusetts. I brought the envelope into the kitchen, setting it on the island where Emma was working on her laptop. Express delivery from Boston, I said casually. Emma looked at the envelope, and all the color instantly drained from her face. She slammed her laptop lid shut. Boston? I asked, reading the corporate logo on the corner. What's in Boston, Em? It's a contract offer, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I stepped closer to the island. A contract offer for what? A 10-month lead illustrator position for a major international children's book series, she confessed, staring at the counter. It requires on-site residency in Boston starting in 5 weeks. The news hit my chest like a physical blow. A 10-month residency? When did you apply for this, Emma? 3 months ago, she admitted quietly. 3 months ago? I repeated, my voice rising with sudden, uncharacteristic anger. I was in Europe for 7 months, and you were interviewing for a project that moves you 1,000 miles away for nearly a year? And you didn't say a single word to me? Emma stood up from her stool, her dark eyes flashing with sudden, raw frustration. Why would I tell you, Nathan? You were in another country. You could have called me, I argued, taking a step toward her. We talk 3 times a week. Emma let out a sharp, bitter laugh. Oh, that's incredible. That is truly incredible coming from you. What is that supposed to mean? I demanded. You don't get to disappear for 7 months and then be hurt because I learned how to leave too, she shouted, tears welling up in her hazel eyes. The sentence struck the kitchen like a physical explosion. I stood frozen on the hardwood floor, stripped of all my witty defenses. I didn't disappear, Emma, I said, my voice shaking. I was working. You sent postcards, Nathan, she cried out, her voice breaking. You accepted a 7-month international assignment, signed the contract, and then called me to tell me where you'd be. You didn't ask if I was okay with it. You didn't ask how I felt. You just mapped out your life and expected me to be sitting right here when you got back. Because you're my best friend, I yelled back, my composure completely shattering. I thought you were proud of my career. Stop calling me your best friend like it's a smaller word than love, she screamed back, tears spilling over her eyelashes. The silence that followed was terrifyingly absolute. Emma wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, taking a shaky, shuddering breath. Do you know what is so completely exhausting about you, Nathan? You are always here when I am broken. You show up before I even ask. You remember things nobody else remembers. But the second the future becomes real, you act like I don't exist in it. She reached into her hoodie pocket, pulled out the cream-colored envelope marked Nathan, and threw it onto the kitchen island between us. That's why I told you not to go upstairs on Thursday night, she choked out through a soft sob. Because I spent 7 months sleeping in your bed, looking at your postcards, trying to convince myself that missing you this much was normal. I picked up the envelope with trembling fingers, pulling out the folded piece of paper inside. It wasn't book notes. It was a letter written in her handwriting, dated 2 months into my European trip. Nathan, the letter read, I am mad at you for leaving. I am mad at you for making leaving look so easy. But mostly, I am mad at myself for building an entire life around a man who doesn't even know he's in it. My throat felt completely closed up. I looked across the island at her tear-streaked face. Emma, I whispered softly. Don't, she sobbed, turning her head away. Don't say something nice just because I embarrassed myself. I am trying to figure out how to tell you that I've been in love with you for 4 years without sounding like the dumbest man alive. I confessed, my voice breaking with raw vulnerability. Emma froze completely. She turned her head back toward me, her mouth parting in shock. 4 years. Roughly? I said, a watery smile touching my lips despite the tears stinging my own eyes. Roughly? She repeated softly. I didn't mark the exact calendar date, I murmured, taking a slow step around the island toward her. I didn't take the Lisbon project because you weren't important enough to stay for, I took it because I was terrified that if I asked you to matter in my decision, you'd realize how much power you had to destroy me if you didn't feel the same way. Emma stared at me, her breathing shallow and fast as the magnitude of my long-standing fear finally registered. You really flew across an entire ocean faster than you walked across this kitchen to tell me that? She asked, her voice trembling. Apparently, I whispered, reaching out to gently frame her face with my hands. Can I kiss you now? You're 4 years late, Nathan Reed, she whispered back, leaning into my touch. Yes. I leaned down and pressed my lips to hers. It was a deep, warm, and emotional kiss, erasing 11 years of silence, witty misdirections, and artificial boundaries. When we finally separated, resting our foreheads together in the quiet kitchen, Emma let out a soft, shuddering sigh against my lips. Then she looked over at the Boston contract sitting on the island. "Now," she whispered softly, "we have a problem." The Boston contract sitting on the kitchen island required a formal response by 5 p.m. on Saturday afternoon. It was currently Friday evening. We had exactly 24 hours to navigate the crisis. If she accepted, she would leave for Massachusetts in 5 weeks for a 10-month residency that represented the largest artistic opportunity of her professional life. My old, self-sacrificing habits immediately flared up. "You should take the contract, Em," I said firmly, sitting beside her at the kitchen island. "It's an incredible opportunity for your career. You have to go." Emma turned to look at me, her hazel eyes instantly flattening into sharp disappointment. "Seriously?" That took less than 10 seconds. "Emma, it's a lead illustrator position for an international book series," I argued. "I am not going to sit here and be the guy who holds you back from your dreams. Stop deciding what is best for me before I've even finished the conversation," she countered, her voice rising with frustration. "You are doing it again. You are making executive decisions about our life, so you don't have to face the terrifying risk of actually planning a future together." Her words cut straight through my defenses because she was completely right. I was trying to play the noble martyr so I wouldn't have to navigate the messy, vulnerable reality of a long-distance relationship. "I don't want you to stay in Savannah because of me, Emma," I said softly, taking her hand in mine. "I want you to stop planning a life where I am automatically left out." Emma stared at me, her expression softening as my words registered deep inside her chest. She didn't want me to sacrifice my career to prove my love. She wanted me to prove that she was worth building a shared plan around. "I want the Boston project, Nathan," she confessed honestly, looking directly into my eyes. "And I want you. I am done pretending those two things cannot exist in the same life." "Then let me be part of the plan," I whispered. That night, we sat side by side at the kitchen table with our laptops open, approaching the crisis with practical maturity instead of surrendering to fear. Boston was a major media and publishing hub, but my work as a freelance heritage photographer allowed for substantial schedule flexibility. We reviewed her contract details carefully. The project involved 3 heavy production phases, but allowed for remote digital draft submissions during intermissions. We mapped out a concrete working routine. Months 1 to 2, Emma would establish her studio in Boston. We scheduled video calls 3 nights a week, with zero pressure for constant texting during heavy deadline days. At end of month 2, I would book a 2-week architectural shoot in New England, extending my stay to live in her Boston apartment for 10 days. A month 4, Emma would use her remote editing allowance to return to Savannah for a full week. A month 6, I would take a scheduled hiatus to join her in Boston for 2 weeks. A month 5 checkpoint. We established a firm emotional rule that after 5 months, we would sit down together in person and honestly evaluate how the distance was working, speaking the raw truth instead of letting quiet resentment build up. Minimum 1 long visit every 6 weeks in the same city, Emma stipulated, pointing at my digital calendar. 2, I corrected smoothly. I am making up for 4 years of wasted time. Fair, she smiled softly, leaning her head against my shoulder. At 10 a.m. on Saturday morning, 7 hours before her deadline, Emma opened an email draft to the Boston executive editor. Instead of instantly clicking accept, she submitted a formal inquiry asking for remote drafting allowances and flexible schedule blocks for her home visits to Savannah. At 2:15 p.m., the publishing house responded. They officially approved the hybrid drafting blocks and confirmed her hiatus schedule. At 4:41 p.m., 19 minutes before her deadline, I sat beside Emma at the kitchen table with her cursor hovering over the final contract acceptance button. "Last chance to tell me this is completely insane," she said, looking over at me. "Taking the job is great career sense," I teased warmly, wrapping my arm around her waist. "Dating me for 11 years was the insane part. Accept the offer, Em." "And us?" she asked softly. "Take us with you?" I whispered, leaning in to press a warm kiss against my lips. Emma locked eyes with me, smiled, and clicked accept offer. 14 months later, the Boston book series wrapped up its final production cycle. Those 10 months of long distance were far from an effortless movie montage. Long distance is demanding and unglamorous. There were dropped video calls, terrible internet connections during hotel stays, delayed flights, and weeks when Emma was too exhausted from book launch deadlines to do anything more than text, "I love you," before falling asleep. We had real arguments, like when I fell back into my old habit of saying whatever works for you, instead of admitting I missed her, or when Emma got overwhelmed and tried to handle a crisis alone without telling me. But this time, neither of us ran away. Whenever fear crept in, we picked up the phone and talked through the discomfort until the air was clear again. I flew to Boston 3 times, and Emma spent 2 wonderful weeks working alongside me in Savannah. We didn't sacrifice our ambitions for love. We built a life large enough to hold both. When her contract ended, her successful work on the series led to a senior remote illustrator role with an international publishing house, allowing her to establish her primary studio right back home in Savannah. After nearly a year of officially dating, we decided it was time to take the ultimate step. We officially signed a lease on a sunlit, historic 3-bedroom home near the Savannah riverfront. On our first afternoon moving into the new house, I returned home from a 3-day photography shoot in Atlanta. I unlocked the front door and stepped into the foyer. Emma was standing at the bottom of the staircase, holding a mug of tea. As I set my camera bags down and started heading toward the stairs, Emma bolted over and planted herself firmly in front of the banister, using the exact same pose from 14 months ago. "Wait," she said, trying to keep a completely serious face. "You can't go upstairs." I stopped, looking at her with a knowing smile. "We've done this before, Em." "I remember," she teased. "Is there an animal up there?" I asked. "Still not funny," she countered. 10 minutes, I asked. 5, she smiled. 5 minutes later, Emma led me up the stairs by my hand. She opened the door to the large room at the end of the hall. It wasn't just my room or her room anymore. She had transformed the space into a shared creative studio. My photography editing monitors set up on one side, her drawing desk on the other, and framed prints of my Lisbon postcards hanging on the wall between us. "I thought we needed one room that wasn't yours or mine," she whispered, looking up at me. "I wanted a space that belonged to both of us." I looked at the framed postcards, then down at the woman who had transformed my entire understanding of home, safety, and love. "When I came home from Europe 14 months ago," I said softly, "I thought I had missed my house. I was wrong. I missed you. Took you 11 years to figure that out, Nathan?" she teased softly, resting her head against my chest. "Technically 4, I corrected, wrapping my arms tightly around her waist. "Can you go upstairs now?" she whispered. "I'm already here," I replied, leaning down to press my lips to hers. "And I'm not going anywhere." Looking back over those 11 years, I realized that what almost cost me the love of my life wasn't the distance or the career opportunities. It was the belief that staying safe behind quiet rules was better than risking everything to build a real future. Home isn't the place you never leave. Home is the place with the person who keeps making you want to find your way back. If you realize that you were silently falling for your best friend, the person who held your whole world together, would you risk everything to speak the truth, or would you stay silent to keep things safe? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.